Hey Lee, how's it going?
It's going well. Why don't we get started, and then people can join as we go. Um, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Lee Bergstein. I'm here with my partner Cooper Knowlton. We're partners at Bergstein, Flynn and Knowlton. We're a small law firm that is not involved in election law whatsoever. So we thought, let's throw an election law event. But in all seriousness, we're really excited to have Andrew Bauman and Jerry Goldfeder joining us this late afternoon tonight on the eve of the election, when I know they're both very, very busy, to talk about some really important, significant issues with respect to tomorrow night. So I wanted to just introduce Andrew and Jerry first, and then I'm going to give them the floor and let them talk about some of the more important issues that we're going to be confronting tomorrow. Andrew Bauman is a Senior Vice President of Research and Global Strategy at Global Strategy Group. He provides strategic support and research for campaigns, corporations, and other organizations. We're also joined by Jerry Goldfeder, who's an election lawyer at Strzok LLP. He also teaches election law at Fordham Law School. Really appreciate both of you being here tonight. Obviously a very busy time for both of you, and we're looking forward to a really interesting conversation about what might happen tomorrow and what might happen beyond tomorrow. I think we're all really looking forward to seeing what's going to happen, but we're also a little bit anxious, so hopefully this can provide some clarity as to the roadmap for the next few days and the weeks and months ahead. So I guess, Andrew, why don't we just start by getting an overview of what the polling landscape looks like right now, both nationally and then in some of the more significant battleground states.
Great. Yeah, and I need screen sharing ability, which I still don't have, unfortunately. There you go. All right. Well, thanks very much for having me, first of all. So just a little bit about my background. I'm a Democratic pollster based out of Colorado. I work for campaigns and advocacy groups and companies across the country. This cycle, I'm working for up in Montana. I'm working on the Senate race here in Colorado, and I'm working on some House races across the country. So I obviously come at this from a Democratic perspective, but I'll try to play it down the middle and sort of give hold on a second, and give sorry, I'm having some weirdness here. There we go. All right, sorry about that. And give it right down the middle. So just a little bit about us first. So I already mentioned myself. GS Global Strategy Group, which is my firm, is the largest Democratic and progressive polling firm in the country. We obviously do a lot of work for Democratic campaigns. You can see some of our clients on the right-hand side of this slide here, but also for foundations and advocacy groups, sort of in the center or center-left of the political spectrum generally, or nonpartisan. And then we work for companies across the country too, from ESPN to Google to Comcast. And half of our firm is polling and research, which I'm part of, but we also have a public affairs and communication shop as well. And the kind of work we do for our clients, be they political campaigns, foundations, or companies, is to really help them build and protect reputations, advance legislative, regulatory, and policy goals, and of course understand, and this is what my specialty is, and understand audiences and reach them with the right messages to accomplish their goals. And since obviously we're talking to a lot of lawyers here today, I just wanted to mention that we have partnered with a lot of law firms to sort of help clients, joint clients that are facing both legal and public opinion and public affairs issues. You can see some of those here. So let's just jump in on where things stand today. So with the day to go, the races remained pretty stable. Biden leads by about 9 in the polling averages. This is what I'm showing you here is the 538 polling average. He's currently up 9, 52 to 43. A couple of weeks ago that had reached an 11-point margin, which was his widest of the cycle, but it's really been quite stable, throughout. There have been some dips and ups and downs, a little bit, But this is one thing that's very different from 2016. 2016 was very dynamic. You know, there was lots and lots of ups and downs. You can see here over the last 6, 7, 8 months, it's been in that range from +6 to +11, with Biden really hovering at or above 50, and he ends at 52% with Trump at 43. Now, of course, the presidency is not decided on the popular vote; it's decided through the Electoral College. And at 538 and The Economist, one of the things they've done throughout the cycle is have a forecast projecting what they viewed as the probability that Biden or Trump would win the Electoral College throughout the cycle. And so what I'm showing here is that time series for both of those projections. 538 started theirs in June. The Economist started theirs back in March. And you can see, while they differ a little bit, what's been happening over the last month or two is the same for both. That both as the clock has ticked out and generally we've been getting better polls for Biden in the states for the most part. You can see Biden's win probability has increased. And as of this morning, it had reached 90% in the 538 forecast and 96% in the Economist forecast. And looking at that sort of on a more granular level, here's what we're sort of seeing on a state by state summary. And again, what I'm showing here is at the top, that the top number is the percentage chance that 538 is giving Biden to win each of these geographies. And then at the bottom, you see the current polling average in those states. And we've done our own polling, which generally matches up with this. But so obviously the big three that everybody talks about all the time are Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania, the so-called blue wall that Trump shattered in 2016, the Rust Belt states. Right now, Michigan and Wisconsin are looking pretty solid for Biden. You can see it. He's up 8 in the 538 538 polling average for both of those states. That's the reason there has been so much focus on Pennsylvania. Most analyses place that as the tipping point state, the state that is most likely to decide the election, and I think that is correct. And generally the last polls have come in with Biden around 5 or 6 points up. You can see that in the 538 average, he's up 5, and they give him an 87% chance to win. So that's all Biden needs to win an electoral college majority. You can see that that's not his only path. I think one of the big differences between now and 2016 and the big differences for Biden and Trump this time is that Trump really has a very narrow path. He has to win all of the states from Pennsylvania to the right on this slide. That is Trump's only path to winning re-election. Biden's path is if he loses Pennsylvania, he could win Arizona and Nebraska's 2nd district, which is heavily favored to do in Nebraska's 2nd district, or he could just win Florida, or he could just win North Carolina or Georgia. I don't think there's a world where he loses Pennsylvania and wins Ohio or Iowa, but theoretically those could help too. But there's a lot of paths. And sort of those Sun Belt states, Arizona, Florida, North Carolina, and very interestingly, Georgia now are all sort of tilting towards Biden by a small amount, but real amounts. And then you've got Ohio, Iowa, and Texas that are sort of more reach states. But you can see the difference between a 418 electoral vote wipeout and Biden just barely eking across the line is only 4 or 5 points. So there's a wide range of outcomes. But right now we're closer to, there's more chance of an electoral college blowout than there is of a Trump victory, which doesn't mean it can't happen. But here's, I think, one of the better explanations or illustrations of that fact. This slide shows the current polling margin in all of those states I just mentioned, plus Nevada and Minnesota, 2 states that Biden is defending. And it shows you what would happen if the polls were exactly as wrong as they were in 2016 and exactly as wrong as they were in 2012. Everybody talks about the 2016 polling miss, but actually the polls were more off in 2012. They just were off in the direction of the candidate who won. They underestimated Obama. So you can see if the polls in 2020 are exactly as off as they were in 2016, and I don't think there will be, and I'm happy to get into that more, Biden still wins a sizable electoral college majority, although he's only winning Pennsylvania, Arizona, Florida, and Georgia by the slimmest of margins, but he wins a sizable electoral college majority. If the polls are off as they were in 2012, it's an enormous landslide. And let's talk a little bit about the House and the Senate quickly. This is the generic House ballot. On the right, you see where it's been this entire cycle in 2020. Again, I'm using the 538 average here. On the left is the same 538 average from 2 years ago in 2018. We're ending with Democrats up about 7.5 points in the generic ballot. That's about a point worse than they were in 2018. Despite this fact, 538 gives Democrats a 95% chance of retaining the House. The Economist says a 99%. And Cook Political Report is now projecting, and actually they changed this morning, so it's now more of like a 10 to 15 seat gain that they're projecting for Democrats in the House. So very unlikely that Democrats lose the House, and the likelihood is that they're actually going to be expanding their majority. The Senate, much more interesting, of course, that's on a razor's edge. Currently, Democrats hold 47 seats. If Biden wins the presidency, they need to get to 50. I don't think there's much of a world where Trump wins and Democrats take the Senate. So I'm going to be thinking about it, in that world where Biden wins the presidency. Only need three seats then to give to make Chuck Schumer the majority leader. Obviously, more than that would be, give some breathing room to Democrats and not require Kamala Harris to break ties. And similar to the presidential forecast, 538 and The Economist have been, have had a forecast for the Senate as well. You can see that they're pretty similar also, again, with The Economist a little bit more bullish for Democrats. But, basically they're now at, close to 3/4 or 80% chance that Democrats are going to take the Senate. And if you had said that at the beginning of this cycle, I think you would have been laughed out of the room. There was really not a lot of people thinking that Democrats had a great chance to take the Senate, because folks could really only look at the map and see 2, maybe 3 pickup opportunities. And Democrats have to defend Alabama, where we're almost certainly going to lose. But the map has gotten much, much bigger than sort of anybody predicted at the beginning of the cycle. And so these are the top 6 pickup opportunities for Democrats. Here in Colorado, where I'm from, is the #1 pickup opportunity. Even though 538 gives us an 84% chance of picking that up, I think that race is basically over. Our polling has Hickenlooper up by 12 or 13 points, and Biden winning Colorado by 15 points or so. Arizona also not quite as in the bag, but those 2 are the ones that sort of everybody thinks are mostly a given. But then the interesting thing is the range of pickups beyond that, picking up, and that would be if you assume we lose Alabama, Democrats win those seats, and also assume the Democrats hold Michigan, which I think they will. That would be a net pickup of 1. Then you've got a lot of races that are much, much closer. Cal Cunningham, he is favored. 538 gives a 64% chance of him winning in North Carolina. The fact that he couldn't keep it in his pants has sort of made this closer than it needs to be, but he probably holds on. The Georgia races are really interesting. This next seat right here, this will likely go to a runoff in January, but the momentum is really on Democrats' side, and the fact that the 2 Republicans in that race, Collins and Loeffler, are tearing each other to shreds and moving further and further to the right, has really increased the chances that Democrats will take that seat. Up in Maine, Susan Collins has come back a little bit at the end of the cycle. I think 2 weeks ago, most folks would have said that she was a decisive underdog. Now it's going to be really close, but I think Sarah Gideon holds on and wins that race for Democrats. Iowa is going to be, really, really close, despite that Des Moines Register poll. Right now, 538 has a dead even 50-50 shot. But then you have this whole second tier of races that are really in play to one degree or another. John Ossoff is basically tied for the polls in Georgia. 538 gives him a 43% chance. I think that underrates it. I think he will win tomorrow, but it's going to be close. Montana is going to be very, very close, but Democrats are probably the underdog there. But then you have Alaska, Kansas, South Carolina, and to a lesser extent, Texas and Mississippi all sort of in play. And really the difference between a 2 and 10 seat pickup for Democrats is only 2 or 3 points on the margin across the country. It's that close in a lot of these races. And finally, I just want to sort of give a sense of early voting and where things stand. Obviously, it's been unprecedented this year. 95 million votes have already been cast, way, way more early votes this year than 4 years ago. This is what the electorate looks like right now as of 2 days or a day before the election in 2020 compared to where it was at the same point in 2018 and 2016. I'm showing you at the top the electorate, what the electorate looks like based on race and education. On the bottom is modeled partisanship. So, some of these fancy analytical models, what they think people are in the file. The biggest thing is that the 2020 electorate, certainly who has voted so far and what we think the final electorate will be, is significantly less white non-college than 2016. And that's a big change and an important change, obviously, since among white voters, education is a strong predictor of the vote. Trump's base are white non-college voters. People of color, obviously, a base for Biden, and white college have been moving in his favor. That's been who's been driving the surge of early vote, or white college-educated voters. But actually, voters of color, while they were sort of lagging for a little while, are starting to catch up. And you can see that also sort of more people in the middle and center left that voted this time compared to the last two elections than voters on the right. I would also note, it's not on this slide, but the electorate this time is actually significantly younger than the last 2 years or 2 cycles at this point of the election. So all those things sort of augur well for Biden, but it's not overwhelming. And the other piece is that even though the model partisanship here doesn't look a ton different than 2016, what we're seeing in surveys is that's actually underestimating the early vote, that the early vote is actually tilting significantly more Democratic. But what that also means is that the people that are waiting to vote on election day tilt more Republican than you would think based on these models. So you're really going to see, and this is going to come into play into how the results are reported, which I'll get to in a second, a big difference in that early vote, especially people that voted very early, tilting very Democratic. The election day vote going to tilt more Republican than it has in the past. And let's take a quick look, and then I'll stop filibustering. As sort of maybe the 2 most critical states. This is Florida, looking at the electoral vote, the early vote, as of this morning. So as of this morning, about 100,000 more Democrats had voted than Republicans. That's pretty similar to this margin that was in 2016, at least percentage-wise, a little bit better for Democrats than 2016, and certainly better than 2018 early vote. I think if at the end of the day, if party registration of the end electorate is close to even, then Biden has a really good shot. So the question is, how much did Republicans erode that 100K advantage on election day? But the other thing you can see, the electorate, again, significantly less white non-college. You actually have Hispanics coming out in relative force compared to certainly 2 years ago, but even 4 years ago, and African Americans actually lagging a little bit, although I will note that this data was before we got the incoming data from yesterday, when the polls always happen. So there was a good influx of African Americans yesterday that should bring these numbers up a little more. Now this slide shows you why Trump is trying to do what he's trying to do in Pennsylvania. The early vote there is not as large as it is in some other states, but it's also much bigger than it's ever been before. There's never really been a big early vote in Pennsylvania. And the early electorate in Pennsylvania is tilting hugely Democratic this year. You can see by party registration, 67% Democrat, 23% Republican. There is going to be an absolutely enormous gap between the early vote and the election day vote in Pennsylvania, with that early vote very, very heavily Democratic, and the election day vote more tilting towards Trump. And that's going to create what people have called sort of a red mirage. And so you have different county rules in different states. Republicans in Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin have steadfastly refused to allow election officials to count the vote, to count early votes early. So what you're going to see on election day is those states are going to count election day votes first, and then they're going to start counting early votes later. So the first results you're going to get in Michigan and Pennsylvania, and to a lesser extent Wisconsin, are going to be good for Trump. But as the early vote gets counted, it will get more and more Democratic. And since the early vote might not really start getting counted until tomorrow and beyond in Pennsylvania, when we go to sleep tonight, there's a good chance that Trump will be ahead in the count, which is why you see in news reports, saying he's going to try to declare victory and send in the lawyers. And I'll leave Jerry to talk more about that. The flip side is that's not what's going to happen in every state. Some states, including my home state of Colorado, but more importantly, Florida, North Carolina, Georgia, and some others you see on the left, they are allowed to count ballots beforehand. And actually, they'll be counting early ballots first. So when Florida starts coming in, those numbers are likely to be very, very good for Biden. And they're likely to get worse as the rest of the night goes on and the election day vote is counted. So those will be more of a blue mirage. But so we're at the end of the day, we're not going to know, probably, we won't know the winner of Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, maybe not Wisconsin, on election night, but we should know the winner of Arizona, Florida, Georgia, North Carolina. So if Florida, if Georgia, if North Carolina get called for Biden on election night, then I think we'll have a good idea of that he's going to be the president. If those states all go for Trump, then we're going to have to wait for those Rust Belt states to count, and we're going to have a lot of chaos. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jerry to talk about some of the legal ramifications.
Yeah, so
Bauman has stopped screen share.
they say the waiting is part.
So who's going to win, Andrew?
I think Biden's going to win. I don't think we're going to have to wait. I think
Okay.
My gut is that there is going to be a polling error, and it will be slightly against the polls are slightly underestimating where Biden is going to end up. I think the undecideds are breaking his way, and we'll know. They're going to call Florida relatively early tonight, and we'll know that Biden's won. That's
Okay, great. And since you're being recorded, we're gonna hold you to it.
Yeah.
So
I wouldn't want to.
So thank you for that presentation, and thank you for inviting me, Lee and Cooper and the rest of the firm, and thank you all for the participants for coming here today. I hope what I have to say is totally irrelevant, because if the voters decide, and if it's clear what the voters have decided, then the legal machinations become less important, if not unimportant. That said, we can expect the avalanche of litigation to continue. And so what I want to do is to just talk very, for a short period of time about the process and what we can expect. I'm going to start by jumping off on a few things that Andrew was talking about. So Florida is really the first state we need to watch. And Florida has early voting, and they count it in advance. They have been counting the early absentee ballots beforehand. I'm sorry, I should make a distinction. There's early in-person voting, and then there's absentee ballots. So the early in-person votes and the election day votes are all counted on the machines. But in Florida, the absentee ballots, which are surging, are also counted as they come in. That's not true in every state. In fact, it's not true in New York. We don't start counting absentee ballots until next week because they need to be postmarked by tomorrow, but they can be received up until a week from election day. So, but Florida, they're starting to count. Georgia, also early voting and election day voting, those early in-person voting and election day voting, those are on the machines. Those obviously will get those results as well by the end of the night tomorrow, but they too start counting absentee ballots as they come in. North Carolina, similarly. So we have 3 pivotal states where absentee ballots are much higher. The number of absentee ballots are much higher than usual, and they are counted as they come in. And therefore, we can expect in those 3 pivotal states, we can expect more or less to have pretty full results, except for the ballots that come in today, tomorrow. But aside from those late receipts of ballots, we can expect pretty full results in those 3 key states. Pennsylvania has no early in-person voting. They only have election day voting and absentee voting, and the absentee voting, and this is new in Pennsylvania. And so those are going to take a while to be counted. So let me just say one thing about Pennsylvania, and then I will step back to give you a fuller flavor of the process. So Pennsylvania, they need to be, the absentee ballots need to be postmarked by tomorrow. But according to the Supreme Court of the state of Pennsylvania, Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, they can be received by Friday. The Republicans have gone to court. As a matter of fact, they've gone to the United States Supreme Court to stay that ruling by the Supreme Court of of Pennsylvania, but they failed to have it stayed. It was 4-4. They are back in court arguing the merits of whether or not those ballots that are postmarked, the absentee ballots, even though they're postmarked by Election Day, whether they can be received as late as Friday. And so what Pennsylvania is doing is segregating those votes that are postmarked on by tomorrow, but are not received until Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday. So if the Supreme Court of the United States deals with the merits of that case, we can expect that there will probably be a 5-4 decision discounting those absentee ballots that are received after November 3rd. I'm predicting that, but it's based upon my analysis of the votes of the Supreme Court and the new justice. So stepping back, then we know we go to the polls. Early voting and tomorrow is Election Day, but of course we don't elect the president tomorrow. We only elect electors pledged to the presidential candidate. So what I want you to think about is 4 dates. I want you to think about November 3rd, December 14th, January 6th, and January 20th. January 20th will start at the end. January 20th is when the new president puts up his or her right hand and puts the other hand on a Bible or what have you, and the new term starts. It's in the Constitution. The expiration of the term of the president, no matter who it is, ends at noon on January 20th, pursuant to the Constitution. We all know that. And so whatever the current president says or does or blusters about and so on, his term is over if he loses. And I choose to believe that neither the Congress, Republicans and Democrats, are going to put up with anybody trying to stay past their term, not to mention the Secret Service, the American people, and the Washington, D.C. police. So I'm not really concerned about that happening. So we do know that when we go to the polls, we're going to elect electors pledged to Trump, electors pledged to Biden, and those electors meet on December 14th. Why December 14th? Because the statute says the first Monday after the second Wednesday in December. It's a cockamamie formula, but that's what they came up with, and that's when the electors meet. That's the real election day. So if everything goes smoothly, we have clear winners in the various states. People have gone to the polls. They've elected Biden electors. They've elected Trump electors. Those electors meet in all 50 states in Washington, D.C., and those electors vote. And there's a clear winner. There's a candidate who wins a majority of the Electoral College votes, which is currently 270. And those results are sent to Congress, which then opens those envelopes from the various states. It's just like the Academy Awards. And they go through from Alabama to Wyoming, and they tally the votes. The Vice President of the United States presides over the tallying. And if everything goes smoothly, it's clear who won in each state. It's clear which electors have prevailed. And it's clear that a president and vice president are chosen on January 6th, and lo and behold, on January 20th. those people are sworn in. That's if everything goes smoothly. This is our 59th presidential election. For the most part, our elections have gone smoothly. For the most part, we have had clear winners in all the states, excuse me, and the electors have met. They've chosen the president and the vice president. They've tallied the votes in the Congress, and those people have been sworn in. We're not so sure that it's going to go that smoothly this time, although it might. If in fact what Andrew has told us, and even if there are polling errors, it appears that sufficient number of states will go to Biden so that he can get 270 electors who will then meet in December, and Congress will ratify those votes. But if in fact that's not the case, then what happens? So let's take Pennsylvania. Everybody has said Pennsylvania is key. Pennsylvania, as I say, did not have early in-person voting, and they've had a huge number of mail-in ballots. And as I've said, there's been a lot of litigation as to which of those mail-in ballots can count. Can they be counted if they come in after November 3rd through November 6th, or should they not be counted? And putting aside that litigation, there's so many ballots. There's a ton of ballots in Pennsylvania. And if it's as close as we predict, as everyone predicts, although we all could be wrong, it could be a blowout even in Pennsylvania. But if it's as close as it appears, that counting can go on and on. And if that counting goes on, and there is no determined winner by the time the electors meet, then what happens? Because they have 5.5 weeks to count the ballots. But if we have a lot of litigation over which ballot should count, and then the question of, is this a valid ballot for Biden? Is this a valid ballot for Trump? Did you fill in the oval correctly? Do you have any extraneous marks? Did you sign your name? Does your signature match with your registration? Did you date it? Did you forget to date it? Did you forget to use your oath envelope to put the ballot into? All sorts of issues. Trust me that we election lawyers become very picayune about. And if that there continues to be litigation over all these absentee ballots, and the count goes on, then what? Well, the Republicans control the state legislatures in Pennsylvania. And the Constitution says the legislature decides how electors are chosen. Now, every state has the same rule that people go to the polls and vote for electors. Now, that wasn't the way it was in the beginning of the Republic. Sometimes legislatures chose the electors pledged to presidential candidates. Sometimes the governor appointed it. Sometimes the people went to the polls. But for the last 145 years, in every state in Washington, D.C., we have gone to the polls to choose our electors. But there's also a statute that says if it's not clear who won, then the legislature, consistent with this constitutional provision, the legislature can decide how to remedy that. And the legislature can choose its own slate of electors. Statute doesn't say that, but that's what historically has occurred. And the Republican legislature can say, you know what, we don't know who's winning. All this litigation, it's unclear. We need electors to be able to meet on December 14th. We, the state legislature, the Republican-controlled state legislature, we're going to choose a slate pledged to Trump. In the year 2000, when it was Bush and Gore in Florida, and it was not clear who won, the Republican legislature and the Republican governor, by the way, Jeb Bush, started the process where they were going to pick a slate of electors pledged to Bush at the time. So it's not unheard of. So the Republican legislature can do that if all this contentious carrying on and litigation, counting ballots and so on continues. legislature can do that. The governor in Pennsylvania, on the other hand, is a Democrat. So he could say, well, not so fast. And he can send in his own slate of electors. So we have the Republican legislature sending to Congress a slate of electors pledged to Trump. We have the governor of Pennsylvania sending a Democratic slate of electors. And then the Congress shall decide. Now, if the Democrats continue to maintain control over the House, and if they win the Senate, then undoubtedly both chambers are going to pick the Democratic slate of electors. But if in fact the Democrats continue to control the House, but the Republicans continue to control the Senate, then there is a logjam as to which slate from Pennsylvania has been elected. And remember, our hypothetical is everything rides on Pennsylvania. Nobody has 270, and the close voting in Pennsylvania will carry the day. So then what happens? Then nobody has 270 electoral college votes. And the Constitution says, the 12th Amendment says, well, then the House of Representatives chooses the President of the United States. It's what we call a contingent election. And the House of Representatives does that when by the procedure of each state having one vote. Now, as it turns out, even though the Democrats control the House of Representatives today, believe it or not, Republicans control 26 delegations. And by the way, that's the magic number. You need a majority of all the states, 26, in order to elect a president. So if it continues that the House, albeit controlled by the Democrats, but the Republicans control the delegations, then the House will elect a president, and it will be Trump. So these are all the contingencies based upon close votes in states, but nobody having 270, and focusing in on Pennsylvania, which everyone believes is the key state, and all this litigation going on to such a degree that we have no clear winner, and we have competing, dueling electoral college slates, and the Congress either votes for the Republican candidate, re-elects Trump, or it goes to the House and they do. So I hope whatever I'm saying is totally irrelevant, but we've been studying these issues for months now, we being people who study elections and people who write pleadings and people who are involved in this process, to make certain that we are prepared for all these eventualities and all the legal issues involved. So I will end with the election administrator's prayer, which all boards of elections throughout the country say all the time, which is, we pray for a landslide. And that's really true for political stability. We want there to be a conclusive result. Some people want Biden, some people want Trump. Whatever it is, we don't want rioting in the streets. We don't want caravans of cars blocking the highways. We don't want people boarding up their stores and rioting. We want a conclusive result. And even if it's a conclusive result for Biden and Trump whines about that he really won and so on and so forth, the machinery that we have for our elections are pretty clear and are accepted to such a degree that we've had statements by Republican senators who have said, if Trump loses, we are going to get behind the fact that he's lost, Biden has won, and we're going to end the election because political stability is so very important. So with that, now that I've given you these nightmare scenarios, I hope none of it is relevant. And I hope Andrew is right, but I'm happy to entertain whatever questions or comments people have.
Chair, I don't know, Lee, were you going to jump in?
No, go ahead.
Jerry, so the doomsday scenario that you just outlined, it really kind of imputes most of the potential. I don't know if it's bad faith, but most of the legal challenges sound like they're happening sort of, or most of the bad actors would be the Pennsylvania legislature. What though in the doomsday scenario is Trump doing to get involved in that process?
Well, the Trump Republican lawyers have been in very active conversations with Republican-controlled legislatures throughout the country about this. It's not just Pennsylvania. There are 29 states where the Republicans control the legislature, and 21 states where the Republicans control the legislature and the governor's mansion. So they would be kind of free, those 21 states, kind of free to, if there is a very close indeterminate winner, in a very close election, very close margin, and an indeterminate winner, I wouldn't have put it past any one of those 21 states to step in and choose a set of electors pledged to Trump. It's not what we do, but apparently, as the president has said, I know this is nonpartisan, but I'm only reviewing his own statements. He is going to do whatever he can to declare victory, and he has been working, and the leadership of the party has been working with these legislatures to prepare for that.
I see.
How's that for like giving you a good night's sleep?
I
That's why I say I hope I'm irrelevant.
I have one question that was somewhat related to what Cooper brought up, which is, obviously at a rally yesterday, Trump said everybody's going to vote, and then the lawyers are going to start working immediately after the votes. So is he talking about contesting ballots? Is he talking about contesting votes? What do we expect the lawyers are going to be doing over the course of the next, few days, the next week?
Well, it depends on the margin in the state, but they are going to be contesting the procedures. Example, Florida. Example, Pennsylvania, whether those absentee ballots that are received after election day should be counted or not. In the state of Texas, it's been ruled that drive-in voting can be counted, and there have been about 127,000 of those drive-in voting votes cast already. But Texas, like Pennsylvania, are segregating those votes, so there may very well be litigation relating to whether those should be counted. Again, it depends on the margin and what the overall picture is. And then a litigation relating to the actual counting of the ballots, whether it's a valid ballot or not. When you go in and you sign your name, is that signature the same as your voter registration? Well, if I'm a lawyer and I realize that you're a Democratic voter, I might say, that signature is different, and therefore don't open the envelope. It shouldn't count. So there's all sorts of things like that. And then once the ballot is open, you have lawyers monitoring that. And you may have circled Biden's name instead of filled in the oval. And that is totally acceptable in most states because it evidences the intent of the voter. But I don't think that's valid. And I'm going to challenge it because the instructions are very clear to fill in the oval. So there's all sorts of stuff that lawyers, this is why people don't like lawyers, that the lawyers will get involved in.
I hole punched my ballot. Is that okay?
If you're in Florida in the year 2000.
I had one more question, and there are a couple of audience questions, and I want to be respectful of both your time. I know you have to teach a class in a few minutes. My question is, suppose that Andrew's prognostications come they're realized, tomorrow night, and the election's decided in favor of Biden, do you anticipate, for instance, in Texas, that these legal challenges will continue because the scope of the victory is still going to be important? Or would those kinds of legal challenges stop, assuming that there's a Biden victory pretty quickly?
Well, the real answer, of course, is I don't know. It depends on the margins in the various states that have apparently given Biden at least 270 electoral college votes. If it's clear that he won Florida to the rest of the world, but the Republicans view the margin as sufficiently problematic, they might very well challenge it if that's necessary to bring him down below 270. What's more likely to happen is there will be challenges in multiple states in order to bring the margins down, either to shift it to his column or to make it ambiguous as to who won. And if that occurs, then we can expect the courts to really make determinations that will decide who won. So even if Andrew is right, they may very well aggressively pursue their litigation in order to create ambiguity and perhaps even change the result. Because there's so many absentee ballots that it's very hard to feel 100% comfortable that that Biden could win outright tomorrow night or Wednesday morning.
Well, and also to that point, Jerry, I mean, with the example of Texas, even if Biden is clearly the winner of the presidency, those votes could make the difference in the Senate race there or the railroad commissioner race. So
yeah, well, that's true.
I would expect Republicans would, go all out to do what they can to muck around in things, even if the presidential race is decided.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right.
Jerry, do you get a sense? I know there were a lot of issues during the primaries with taking a long time to count votes, and do you get a sense that most of the states have figured it out, and that there aren't going to be a lot of delays in counting, or do you think that there are some states that we could be looking at weeks to just figure out sort of the actual result?
In large part, it depends on how aggressive lawyers are. Generally speaking, across the board, the people who work at the boards of elections or whatever they call it in various states are professionals. There's very little fraud going on, if at all, and they're intending to and equipped to count these ballots as quickly as possible. When you have lawyers on both sides challenging everything and raising all these issues, that obviously interferes with a quick count. Having said that, some states can count very quickly because they've done most of the count. They can reach a result very quickly because they've done most of the counting already, like Florida, like Georgia, like North Carolina. But some states can't start counting until afterwards, like Pennsylvania, like New York. So it's inconsistent because we have this system where we have 51 different elections going on, 50 states and Washington, D.C., with 50 different election rules, with different rules with who can cast an absentee ballot, how do you count it, when it needs to be counted, and so on.
Yeah.
So that's a long way of saying it depends on the state, it depends if there's litigation, but they're pretty equipped to deal with it.
Jerry, someone asked that in the event that this goes to a contested election before Congress, would it be the new Congress that comes in, or would it be the old Congress?
Oh, good question. It would be the new Congress. The new Congress takes their seats January 3rd.
And it's decided not by the vote of everybody in Congress, but by state vote, which is why, right, even though with today's Congress, if it were today's Congress, even though Democrats control the House, they
Well,
would lose
that's if
that
the
vote.
House chooses the president. But Congress on January 6th tallies the votes, and the House and the Senate both have to agree of which slate of electors is the right one, or even if there's only one slate of electors, whether or not that's legitimate. As I say, for the most part, in all of our, this being the 59th presidential election, for the most part, most of this has gone relatively smoothly. There's been, a handful of elections where there's been congressional contention and judicial intervention and so on, but for the most part, it's not been the case. And I'll leave you with one fun fact that 10 of our presidents have run for re-election and they lost. And they just very graciously, although not very happily, handed over the keys to the White House. Grace is not exactly in this guy's DNA, but I think he will be forced to make good on his promise to leave the country if he loses.
Do you think even if he loses, he'll ever admit that he lost?
No. No, probably not. I think it would have been stolen from him.
If he loses, my prediction is he'll start running for 2024. I don't think he'll ever actually run, but he'll act like he's running until the day to file in 2024, and it will be 3 years of him complaining about how it was stolen from him and ginning up his base even further.
Yeah.
And then Don Jr. will run.
To address a different issue, if he loses, there's no question in my mind that he will either pardon himself or resign at the last minute and have Pence pardon him. But that doesn't impact state prosecution. The pardon power only relates to federal prosecution. And Cyrus Vance is hot on his trail, so that's not going to go away.
That's the next webinar.
Okay.
So
there's also no doubt in my mind that even if he loses, he will still be the lead story on the news for, people think he's out of our life. I think even if he loses in a landslide, he's still leading the number one story on the news for the foreseeable future almost every single night.
Well, I think you're right. So I represented Pete Buttigieg when he was running here in New York, and he used to say it's time to change the channel. So even though he will try to dominate the news, we don't really have to listen to him anymore.
we'll see if that's the reality or not.
Yeah, we don't know. We really don't know.
Yeah.
Let's just get through this week first, and then we'll deal with changing the TV channel in December or January, depending on. Well,
crazy. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, I want to thank both of you for your time. And we're going to, with Andrew's permission, we're going to share that slide deck that you put together with our mailing list. And obviously, if anybody have any questions, feel free to either contact us or contact the panelists directly. You can Google them and get their contact information pretty easily if you have any questions. So. Any final thoughts, Andrew or Jerry, before we say adieu?
No, I hope I'm right. Well, I'll be drinking a lot of bourbon if I'm not.
I think we're all going to be drinking bourbon tomorrow night.
Yeah. Well, it's not just a regular election. You win, you lose, you're disappointed, you're not disappointed, you're happy. Everyone I know at least, feels that the future of the republic is really at stake here, and it's just causing so much anxiety that it'll be good to get through it.
I think you're certainly right that Jerry. I'm sure folks saw the Des Moines Register poll that came out with Trump up 7 in Iowa this weekend. I got literally 75 text messages in the next half an hour with people I know freaking out about it. So. And they shouldn't have. It's an outlier. All the other polls that sort of came out this weekend have all told a very consistent story, but that tells you how on edge people are. Now I spend half my time as a therapist, not as a pollster.
Tell me about it. I know the feeling. Well, thank you, Lee. Thank you, Cooper, and nice to share a panel with you, Andrew.
Thank
You
you.
guys.
This was great. Appreciate your time, everyone.
Sure. Take care.
Thanks all.